PilotSafety.org is a volunteer group dedicated to reducing general aviation accidents by providing free and low-cost safety training for pilots. Learn more now at PilotSafety.org. Our speaker today is Gary Reeves. He volunteers as a Young Eagles flight leader for the EAA. Gary has over 6,000 hours, is an ATP and a master flight, instrument, and multi-engine instructor. Of the 112,000 instructors in the U.S., less than 800 have ever been named master instructor. Gary is one of only 13 to have earned this designation in California. He is a nationally recognized expert in Avidyne and Garmin avionics, FlyQ, ForeFlight, and instrument flying. In May 2016, Avidyne selected Gary Reeves and Pilot Safety as their national training provider. In 2016, Gary was awarded the FAA Instructor of the Year for the Western Pacific region, which includes Arizona, California, Hawaii, and Nevada. This means he is one of the top 8 instructors in the whole country. Please welcome 2016 Western Pacific Regional Instructor of the Year and Master CFI, Gary Reeves.
You know, no matter how many times I see that, it's just still funny. And Eric Cobb says, yay. Thanks, Eric. I'd also like to tell you that pilotsafety.org, we're going to do about 7,000 to 8,000 wings credits this year. All over the country. I speak at Oshkosh and Sun and Fun and pretty much 10 or 12 national shows every year. And I could not do it without Avemco. And Avemco Insurance is one of our largest sponsors. And what I'd like to do here in just a second is I'd like to introduce Mike Adams. Mike is one of my very good friends and is a senior vice president of Avemco. And Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am, Gary, and it's a pleasure to join you this evening.
So
you heard that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Good. Well, I just wanted to say to all of the Avemco insureds, it's a pleasure to be able to have you attend this evening. We support Gary. He's been an excellent instructor. He has a lot of good points. And as an insurance company, yeah, we pay claims, but our real goal when we look at it in the end result is we want to not have to pay claims by making safer pilots. And we found that pilots that train early and train often have fewer claims. So we're glad you're attending tonight. And as Gary did mention, this does qualify for the FAA Wings, which also qualifies for a 5% premium credit if you're an Avemco insured. So if you don't have that credit, and it's generally listed on your data page, please give us a call, and we'll be happy to apply that for you at any time in the policy. So Gary, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. And Mike will be along at the end if you have any questions for Mike. I will say something many people don't know about Avemco. All of the underwriters, including people who have never been pilots, actually are required to spend about 5 hours a year in a simulator going through emergency situations that their clients have gone through and scenarios. And it makes Avemco, to me, really the only safety-based insurance company because they can really kind of understand what pilots have gone through. So I really appreciate Avemco, and let's go ahead and start the presentation. So if you're not familiar with pilotsafety.org, we are a volunteer group with about 14,000 members, and we'll automatically add you as a free member. We do free classes and free webinars just like this constantly. So you'll get an email occasionally with free and some paid classes that we do all over the country. If my voice goes in and out a little bit, I do apologize. I'm fighting just a little bit of a cold that I picked up in Napa this week. What I do for a living, as I volunteer for pilotsafety.org, what I do for a living is I own a company called masterflighttraining.com, and I do 3 and 4 day boot camps in your airplane, at your airport, anywhere in the country, and make you really, really good at Garmin and Avidyne avionics, IFR, and I teach a lot of emergency and mountain flying clinics as well. So what we're going to cover tonight, why you need to plan ahead, ways to reduce rescue time, and that's really critical. People crash, and what's most critical is how fast the rescuers get to you. Some technology recommendations that I think everyone should use. Some supplies that I think everybody should carry in the plane. And some training recommendations for everybody. If you have any questions at any time, just click on the questions tab and send me a question. So let's go ahead and go through this here. I'm also going to talk about some passenger training that you need to do for all of your passengers before every flight. So I want to start off by reading you some NTSB quotes, and this is straight out of the NTSB Aviation Database. I was training a student this morning. We couldn't fly because of my cold, but we were doing ground training. And I logged onto my laptop, and it opened up to NTSB Accident Report Database. It's like, you really do? And I go, yeah, I really do just read probably a couple thousand NTSB reports every single year. It's what I do in my free time. And I like some of these quotes. After receiving flight following, air traffic control noticed the airplane descend and lose contact. A search and rescue was activated, and the airplane was found early the following morning in mountainous terrain. So even with flight following, it could be 12 or 24 hours before they find you. Here's another one. On December 6th, about 1922 local time, the FAA issued an alert notice for the airplane due to concern family members. The airplane was located on December 8th, 2 days later, by local search and rescue personnel. Another one says the pilot radioed a mayday call. The airplane was located the following morning at 4:30 in mountainous terrain by the Ventura County Sheriff's Search and Rescue Team. After the airplane had not returned to its home base airport, a search and rescue operation was initiated the following morning after being reported by the student pilot's father. The airplane was located later that day. So you can see all of these are different scenarios. Another one is several reports of an ELT signal were reported. The ATC supervisor did not report the signal to search and rescue personnel until the following day after the airplane was reported as overdue. The ELT was found at the accident site connected to the antenna, and the on-light was illuminated. The ELT was later tested and emitted an audible tone. Another one says the airplane was not reported overdue for several days and was located in a wood area about 3 days after it had departed. The airplane's emergency locator transmitter, ELT, had an on-off arm switch that was found in the off position. So how exactly do you take off with your ELT turned in an off position? Well, it's a whole lot easier to do than you think it is. In fact, it's a very common thing. This is a picture of my ELT in my personal Cessna 206, insured by Avemco, by the way. And I'd like you to ask yourself, is the picture on the left or the picture on the right the ELT in the armed position? This is not behind a panel. It's in the open part of my plane. Just guessing at it, which one's armed? Well, if you get really, really close, you'll notice the one on the right is armed. Off is actually in the middle. The manufacturer of this ELT puts the lettering on off arm just as raised plastic in the same paint color. So it's almost impossible to see. The other time ELTs get turned off a lot is on maintenance and when people test ELTs. Remember, you can test an ELT for 3 sweeps in the first 5 minutes of every hour. But what a lot of instructors do is they demonstrate an ELT test and then they put it to off and leave it in off by accident. So after all of these slides and all these quotes, I just want to start out. We'll give a couple more here. On May 23rd, about 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, a Grumman AA-1B was substantially damaged when it impacted several trees and terrain. The airplane was found on May 26th, 3 days later. So people with flight following are always safer. People with ELTs are always safer. People on flight plans are always safer. But none of them guarantee they're going to work as planned. You need to be prepared. So if you get nothing else out of this webinar, there is one important thing that I want everybody to take away. And that takeaway for everybody is this. Surviving a crash isn't going to matter if you and your family die waiting for the rescuers. So a lot of people survive crashes, but then do not survive until the search and rescue finds them. And that's what I want to avoid with tonight's webinar. All of you are good pilots. How do I know you're good pilots? Well, because you meet my definition. Gary's definition of a good pilot is simply this: somebody who takes continuing education and goes beyond the minimums legally required. So anyone listening to this webinar tonight or watching the free recording, again sponsored by Avemco, anytime later, you're automatically a good pilot. I know you're a good pilot because you care about safety and you're doing more than the minimums. The problem we have is that good pilots like you don't necessarily plan to crash. And that's kind of a mindset I'd like you to change. I want you to plan to crash because one day you might. Just like I plan for an engine failure before every single takeoff. I rehearse if I have an engine failure on the runway, if I have an engine failure at 400 feet, and if I have an engine failure above 1,000. I verbally rehearse them and I walk through my flow of adjusting switches, trims, and whatever to meet that need. Why? Because I had an engine fire at 600 feet and successfully turned back to the airport with no problems at all. I've had engine failures at very low altitudes and turned back to the airport or made a safe emergency landing other places. And I wasn't even scared when they happened. The definition of an emergency is one of my favorite definitions. It comes from, about 25 years ago when I was going through paramedic school. And my instructor said the definition of an emergency is simple. It's something you're not prepared for or you haven't practiced and trained for. So it's really only scary if you haven't practiced it and trained for it. So I'm going to focus in on a crash of this plane, 4640 Lima. This is a crash in between Northern California and Idaho. It's a Cessna 172, and this plane crashed on May 26th at 9:50 at night. Now, there were lots of mistakes made. The person was not instrument rated, however, ended up at night in a blinding snowstorm. Now everybody goes, well, that's a bad pilot. No, this guy was a good pilot. He just got caught in a really bad situation. And he was not flying with flight following. And everyone's like, well, he's a bad pilot. Now, I recommend very strongly that every flight, including to practice areas for instructors, always be due with radar flight following. The rule of thumb is this. If you file and open a VFR flight plan, they normally find you within a couple of days. If you file and open a flight plan and get radar flight following, they generally find you a whole lot quicker. So I never fly without flight following. Actually, I prefer just to stay in the IFR system. It's the safest of all. But he didn't fly with flight following this time. Well, why? Well, he always did fly with flight following. He only did not fly with flight following on the second leg of his cross-country trip because he didn't think he needed it because he had cell phone coverage all the way and he thought he could call for help. So again, this is a really smart guy who's a really good pilot who did not mean to end up in a blinding snowstorm at night over the mountains. And it's easy to second guess and Monday morning quarterback and, hey, you shouldn't have done that. But he really did get caught in a situation that very quickly spiraled out of his control. And he ended up crashing on at 9:50 at night in the mountains with a wife who was critically injured, a daughter who was injured, and himself was injured. And he and his critically injured unconscious wife and his injured daughter sat in that plane hole for over 40 hours below freezing temperatures and snow with no heat, no food, and not even great medical attention. Don't feel sad. They actually made it. And this is one good-looking family. And this is Brian Brown. He's the guy in the red shirt. And you notice if you look at Brian, he's got that interesting new scar on his forehead. There's his wife and his youngest daughter in the black that made complete recoveries. And there's his oldest daughter that they were actually going to go visit. So I've done this webinar before, and I actually recorded an interview with Brian Brown that I would like to share with all of you now. I'm going to introduce everybody here to Brian Brown, who was actually in that flight. Brian, are you there? Might take just a second.
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, Brian. So, everybody, this is Brian Brown. He was the fire captain who did this. And Brian, we're real happy to know that you and your family all survived and did pretty well. Let me ask you a question.
Thank you.
You were an experienced fire captain for how many years before you made this flight?
28.
28. And I want to tell everybody, this is probably the biggest reason they survived. Because Brian had so much experience as a fire captain, he would respond much differently in an emergency than most people. He's going to stay calm. He's going to look for way outs. And I think that probably played a really key role in helping you survive. But, as a fire captain, didn't you think emergency equipment was needed in the plane?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had some basic equipment that I always stored inside my flight bag. I have a pretty large flight bag that's just about the size of a duffel case or duffel bag, and I did have some equipment in that.
What kind of stuff did you take with you?
It had multi-tool, lighter, ways to start fire. It had basic first aid kit, emergency blankets, the little silver ones that don't take up a lot of space, and a couple of different types of flashlights. One that works normally off battery, and then I actually even had the wind-up generator type that was in there. There's a few other articles. I think there was a small thing of rope and things of that nature, but nothing really huge. But again, for me, that was a lot of stuff, just based on some of my basic training.
Right, and you even had a handheld radio.
Yes, I did have my portable aviation radio that was in that bag as well.
Now, what a lot of people don't know, and it's only because I teach mountain flying for a living, is batteries drain and lose amps very, very quickly as the temperature drops. The battery in my 206, if it's anywhere near freezing at Big Bear, probably only produces 40% of the cranking amps it would on a 70-degree day. So the battery in the handheld, which could have been fully charged, how long did that last?
It didn't even last until about basically 3 in the morning, because I could hear helicopters flying overhead while, trying to find us. And my first thought was, wow, I can talk to them. And when I reached down to get it, because I had it stowed between my feet so I wouldn't lose it, it had already been killed. The batteries had already been shot.
Right. And the way you actually got rescued, what piece of equipment actually saved you guys?
The miracle part, the cell phone, was what actually saved us. Out of everything, the highest technology thing was the thing that actually did save us. And again, on very poor battery power, it was almost dead itself.
And that was your daughter that was able to get a 911 call?
Yeah, and actually what triggered it, because we didn't realize we had our phones at the time, everything went scattered throughout the wreckage, the cell phones included. And at midnight was when my oldest daughter, the one we were flying to see, she actually called our cell phone to try and find out where we were. And when the phone rang, that's when we realized we actually had phones and they were working. And my youngest daughter was able to actually find the phone down into the wreckage.
Okay, hold on. I'm just, we can keep talking. I'm having a little technical problem here with my screen. So Brian, what happened to all the emergency equipment that you did have?
Well, we put the plane down on a 60-degree slope, and so pretty much everything slid back into the deep part of the tail cone of the aircraft. There were a few things that jostled out. That portable aviation radio was one of them, thankfully, because just like you said, I was actually able to turn my portable aviation radio on and determine whether or not my ELT was actually activated and sounding. And, for me, thank God it was, because otherwise the next phase is going in and manually finding it and activating it.
Right. So a lot of the equipment, the stuff you had in the plane, you couldn't get to.
That's correct.
And it was all back in the damaged tail compartment?
Yeah, it was slid back far enough to where we really couldn't reach it easily. And again, with our injuries, it wasn't something that was on the high priority list for me at that point. I had several other factors that actually had a lot higher priority to me than trying to go back and get that gear.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Now, what would you do differently with the survival equipment when you fly today?
I definitely have more of it on my person. I have a lot of military pilots, and especially the ones that helped rescue us. They're dear friends of ours now. They all said, they're trained that if you don't have it on you, you don't have it. And I'd be a strong, very firm believer of that, and even practice that same theory as a fire captain. That if I didn't have it in my fire gear, I didn't have it with me either. So I mean, that's one way to do it. Along with that, I've taken away from some other seminars where purchasing a simple fishing vest that has multiple small pockets on it. That's a great item that, again, you can wear if you're a mountain pilot, that you can put several little items in, be it a lighter, a multi-tool, small first aid kit, and just some other essentials that you think you might need for the area that you fly in. And that's a key, having items that are definitely fitting for the areas that you fly in. But whether you wear it or whether you fasten it to your pilot's seat, or maybe even seat belted into a seat, at least you're more likely to have it with you.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and advance, and I'd love you to stick around and maybe answer some questions at the end. Is there anything you want to add before I continue the show?
Probably one of the biggest things is, like you said, staying calm is got to be the utmost of importance. And it's very difficult when you're injured, or like in my scenario, my wife was very badly injured. Matter of fact, I thought she was dead on impact. And so that's where my priority was working on her. So staying calm can really be a challenge when you're in that sort of a situation. If I hadn't had the training I had, probably wouldn't have been able to stay as calm as I was throughout the rest of that evening. But that's probably got to be one of the biggest things, is stay calm, work through your problems. And in some cases, look at what may be the worst problems that you could have and then try and work.
And he just went on to say that, try and work through it. So if you want to read a really great book, Rescued by Brian Brown, is the story of that entire flight and his rescue 2.5 days later. And you can find that on Amazon. So mistakes he made, and he freely admits he made, is that he was not on an active flight plan and he did not have flight following. So the way they eventually got rescued is the younger daughter in the back found an actual iPhone and got a 1-bar signal through on 911, but the call kind of went like this. My family and I are in an airplane crash. And they said, well, where are you? Well, I don't know. We departed this airport and we were going to this airport and we've been flying for about 40 minutes and now we've crashed. But without flight following, without a flight plan, the rescuers didn't know where to look. And trying to track down an ELT signal at night in the snow in the mountains is not possible. The weather was actually so bad later on that night and early into the next morning that it was a 0-0 visibility and search helicopters couldn't have even flown. So even if they'd been on flight following with a CSAR equipped PLB, which I'll talk about in a minute, with an active flight plan, they still would have been stuck there for at least 12 to 18 hours. Now, again, the only reason he didn't fly with flight following and an open flight plan, because he normally did, and he demonstrated that he normally had used those protections, is they always had cell phone coverage. Well, the problem is, if anybody online in the webinar or watching this recording later will tell you, iPhones don't do well with impacts from drops and crashes. And that's one of the biggest thing about car crashes. I was a paramedic a long time ago, and I will tell you, your cell phone that you're going to plan on calling 911 in a car crash is probably not going to be where you can reach it anyway, because it's been thrown out of arm's reach. So they got very, very lucky that she was able to find one of the 3 cell phones and get a 1-bar call through. So will filing and opening a VFR flight plan actually protect you? Absolutely it does. It can make the difference. It's not enough, but it's a really good start, and you should never fly without it, in my opinion only. So the way flight plans work is this. I've planned a cross-country flight from Long Beach out to visit my friend Bob, hey Bob, at Lake Havasu, and I file and I open a VFR flight plan before I depart. Now remember, flight plans only work if you open them, and they only protect you if you close them after you've landed on the ground and shut down the airplane. One of the biggest mistakes people make, in my opinion, is they cancel IFR before they land and they close flight plans before they land. That is a very, very bad idea. That's like taking off your seatbelt when you're 10 minutes from home. You're not safe until that airplane is tied down and you're in the rental car. So never close a VFR flight plan until you've landed and shut down and tied down the airplane, and never cancel IFR before you've landed and tied down the airplane. They won't look for you if something happens on short final. But we've opened a flight plan, we take off. Unfortunately, we crash about 3 p.m. in the mountains between Hector and Lake Havasu. Now, we were supposed to be there at 4 o'clock, which means 30 minutes after, Leidos, who used to be Lockheed Martin, 1-800-WX-BRIEF, it's now called Leidos. Leidos calls your cell phone and we don't answer. 30 minutes later, they notify the Civil Air Patrol. Unfortunately, the Civil Air Patrol clears your entire route by grid patterns. And since there's no active chapter at Lake Havasu, they have to keep searching these grid patterns 50 miles either side of your route, and 7 hours later they find you with the broken leg and bleeding out. So 7 hours is certainly much better than 2 weeks, but it's still an awful long 7 hours. So remember, if you have questions or comments at any time, please use questions. And Josh Flint, hey Josh, thanks for typing in. Josh has a really great point, and Josh says, I have no faith in the G-switch ELT activation. I have personal experience in Alaska, including the Ted Stevens crash, hit the ELT remote button before going down. What many people don't realize about crashes is that ELTs actually don't automatically trigger in a large number of crashes. Why? Because an ELT, the basic ELT, is designed with essentially a weight and a switch, that if the airplane stops moving forward suddenly, a weight shifts forward and it triggers an ELT. So what if you don't crash nose first? What if you land wheels down or top down or tail down? The ELT may not trigger in those situations. And that's an important thing to know. So Josh had a great point of triggering the ELT before he went down. Now, the other problem that Josh didn't discuss is, let's make sure the ELT survives the crash. Even if the ELT component itself is broadcasting, if the external antenna has been broken off, you're not going to get a signal out. So the ELT thing is, yeah, it's required, and you've really got to have it, but the ELT is not a sudden rescue device. And Stephen Sachs, hi Stephen. Stephen has a great comment, and he says he's toured several towers and that they do not monitor 121.5. In fact, it's actually legally required for you. Did you know that all pilots are legally required to monitor 121.5 on every cross-country trip, if able, if you're going anywhere near a dam, a military reservation, a reservoir, and several other land features? Most people just weren't trained it and they don't listen. I listen to 21.5 on every cross-country trip, and I'm the first one several times a year to report an ELT going off. And I'm going to keep sending in comments and questions, and I'm going to answer more at the end. Now, there is a better answer than just an ELT, and that is called CSAR, and this is a free service from Leidos. Remember, we used to call them Lockheed Martin. Basically, you can buy a device that if you file a flight plan through 1-800-WXBrief.com or by telephone, and you open the flight plan and you have a previously registered device, your airplane is constantly sending them position reports every 2 to 10 minutes, depending on what you pay for, and it's constantly talking to them. So what it works like is this. This is a cross-country trip I did from Long Beach up to Napa, and this is a couple months ago, but I just did that trip yesterday. And what it does is it just reports your position constantly, so your family can monitor it. But again, if it's pre-registered with 1-800-WXBrief.com, that's Leidos, used to be Lockheed Martin. If it's previously registered with flight service and the 1-800-WXBrief people, what happens is on any open flight plan, it's constantly telling them you're moving. So there are 3 devices, and there may be more now, but there are 3 common devices that work with 1-800-WXBrief. One is called an InReach Explorer from DeLorme. DeLorme gave me a free unit a couple years ago, and I thought it was neat. It is a little expensive, but it's got some cool features. You can actually send custom text, and it's got a moving map, and itself acts as a GPS. I don't need a moving map on another handheld device. I got 4 maps in my airplane. I have an Avidyne, I have a Garmin, I have an iPad, and an iPhone. I got GPS coming out my ears. But it was a very capable unit, and I still think they're a great service. There's another thing called the Spider S3 from SpiderTracks.com. I have never used it, but I've heard great things about it. The one I actually carry in my airplane, and because I travel the country for a living, I always have it with me, is the Globalstar Spot Gen 3. Now, in fairness, again, DeLorme gave me a free Explorer, Globalstar gave me a free Spot, but I was going to buy the Spot before they gave me one anyway. It is CSAR capable. It shares the routes and it sends pre-programmed text. But what I like about this is it's the lowest cost unit, which makes it a better fit for more pilots, more affordable, and it works great. So this is how an enhanced search and rescue track actually works. Oh, and real quick before we go, if you go over to findmespot.com/pilot safety, Globalstar is also one of our sponsors, and they give you a free unlimited upgrade. So thank you to Globalstar. But this is how a CSAR crash works, and you're going to find it a lot better. We filed a flight plan through 1-800-WXBrief.com. We opened the flight plan by text message from any cell phone or by email from any cell phone in the run-up area before we take off. And every 2 minutes, my Spot tells 1-800-WXBrief.com where I am. Now, if I crash at 3 o'clock, at 3:05, it says Gary's not moving anymore. What it does is it reports an alert anytime you stop moving that's not at the end of your flight plan. So 5 minutes go by with no forward movement. 5 minutes goes by and they call my cell phone. Hey, Gary, did you stop for gas? Did you stop to hit the restroom? Did you stop for a burger? Are you out of sugar-free Red Bull? Are you okay? When we don't respond, they dispatch search and rescue to those exact coordinates. In this case, it would be a sheriff's search and rescue team from Lake Havasu, and they would go right to those coordinates. That's why a CSAR is so much better than just a flight plan. I still want you to open a flight plan, but my recommendation is that you carry an active CSAR device like the Spot, or you could just pull out your satellite phone and make a 911 call. I do actually carry a Globalstar sat phone as well. And I got to tell you, you just turn it on, point the antenna at the sky, you dial 911 and say, I'm here, giving your exact latitude and longitude. I would like you to come get me now. The cool thing about the Spot and the satellite phone is, yes, it's an extra expense. Let's say you buy the Spot 3 and you buy a Globalstar satellite phone, and total cost, I don't know, $500 or $600, and you're paying $50 to $80 a month for cell phone and Spot service. I gotta tell you, that's cheap compared with the value of my family and the value of my own life. So I really recommend that you carry these technologies. Now, the cool thing about this is I have a mountain cabin, I hike, I backpack, I go out on the water in a boat, I rent an RV every couple years, and I take all this stuff with me. That's the beauty of the stuff being portable, is that you can carry it in any outdoor activity and be a whole lot safer. So let's go back to that crash scene. Equipment that's needed in all planes and would have certainly reduced the injuries in that plane is, please replace your seatbelts with a 4-point harness at a minimum. 5 points even better. The FAA actually specifically recommends that shoulder belts and harnesses would reduce major injuries by 88% and fatalities by 20%. If any of y'all are flying those pre-1970s planes with lap belts only, I cannot encourage you strongly enough to walk, don't run, and order a 4 or 5 point harness system. And this is the 4-point harness system that I actually have installed in my airplane, my Cessna 206. It's all about restraining impact. So does a shoulder belt help? Yeah, a shoulder belt is better than just a lap belt. However, the shoulder belt may not stop vertical impact, meaning if the plane flips over, you're still going to go vertical and hit your head up against the roof, like I did in a crash about 12 years ago. I actually broke my neck and a back in a crash. Not my fault, not the manufacturer of the airplane's fault. It was just a bad chain of events. But we landed in a soft field, flipped over, and I'm 2 inches shorter than I used to be, and I will have neck and back pain for the rest of my life. that airplane was equipped with shoulder belts and airbags, but the airbags did not deploy because the impact wasn't on the nose, it was on the roof. A 4 and a 5-point harness would have prevented my neck and back injuries. So I really, really recommend that everybody install these in their airplane, and they're pretty cheap. And again, they're if it costs you $400 to buy a set of seat belts and $500 to install them, that's cheap to protect the people you love, especially you. Seatbelt replacement is strongly recommended by me. This is not a legal requirement. This does not come from Avemco. This is my personal opinion only. I should have said that at the beginning. All the opinions on this webinar are me. I'm Gary. I have strong opinions about safety. They don't reflect Avemco or any of our other national sponsors. But I strongly recommend that you replace your seatbelts at a minimum of every 10 years and sometimes quicker. Sunlight, just plain sunlight, ultraviolet light actually damages and weakens the fibers in woven seatbelts by a lot. And I do mean a lot. A 10-year-old seatbelt that's been in the sun has a much lower breaking strain, meaning they break quicker at less force than a new seatbelt. So just being in the sunlight weakens these seatbelts. Every time you touch your seatbelt after doing a good pre-flight, because you all do good pre-flights, and you touch these things with a little bit of oil, grease, or solvent on your hands, you're weakening and damaging the fibers even more. And come on, you do a good pre-flight, you're taking fuel samples, you're checking the oil, you're going to weaken the fibers because you are a good pilot and doing what's required, which is a thorough pre-flight. Now, you are legally required by the FAA to do immediate maintenance or replacement if any of the following is true. Any fraying at all, anywhere on the seatbelt, you must legally, from the FAA, immediately replace or remove, send it out for rewebbing, and then put it back in. A lot of people in a lot of flight schools, y'all, I've taught for, almost 12 years now. And I've taught a lot of flight schools with airplanes, shall we say, rougher than others. And there's just a little bit of fraying on the edge. The airplane's unairworthy. It's not legal to fly. Any fraying anywhere on the seatbelt, even just a little bit on the edge, automatically makes that seatbelt illegal. And if it's a required seatbelt for flight, your airplane is unairworthy, because just a little bit of fraying on one edge weakens the entire integrity of the airplane, just like a big nick only in one propeller weakens the strength of that propeller. Any loose hardware. Have any of y'all ever rented the flight school airplanes that just have, that seatbelt that just pops open occasionally? Again, incredibly dangerous and automatically illegal, rendering the airplane unairworthy if it's a required seatbelt. You can't fly with seatbelts that just don't work. And if the tag is missing or illegible. So there's a picture of the harnesses that I installed in my airplane, and you can tell it's done by Aero Fabricators. I believe I bought these online at aircraftspruce.com, and I think I paid my mechanic 2 hours to install them. Just had to drill some holes on the roof and put in mounting brackets and stuff like that. But you see very clearly the model number and the date. If you cannot legibly read the model number and the date of manufacturing, you are legally required to replace those immediately. And that's in the FARs under the maintenance section. So I don't know the specific regulation, but it's under the FARs. I would have to look it up for you. So your airplane is illegal, it's unairworthy, and it is not safe if there's any fraying, loose hardware, or a missing or illegible tag. But y'all, we got to face facts. If the tag is so faded then you can't read it, it's probably over 10 years old, and in my opinion, is not safe to fly with and should be replaced anyway. Now, the over 10 years thing is just my opinion, but I will tell you that a broken seatbelt is not going to protect you as well as one that holds through the crash. It's all about preventing impact and movement. The tighter your seatbelt is, the safer you are because you move less. The injuries in a crash come from movement when the crash stops the airplane. It's your body continues to move at whatever 100 miles an hour you were cruising at, and when you hit things or when things hit you, that's what's going to kill you. You do need to carry some emergency equipment too. Now, a gift store in Big Bear actually sells these. I do have a cabin up in Big Bear, California that I rent to pilots only. Hint, hint, feel free to rent my cabin. But if anybody wants to send me $20, I'll happily forward you this can of dehydrated water, which I just think is funny. But you know what's interesting is a lot of people, especially here in Los Angeles, California, go, no, I have everything I need for an emergency. I've got my visa and a cell phone, neither one of which will do you any good in a mountain flying or wilderness crash. If your phone survives and if the battery still works, you may be able to get a 911 call out, but I certainly wouldn't count on it. And your credit card at that point doesn't do a thing. So I really recommend that you carry several things. And this is what I carry in my plane. I carry a complete set of queen bedding with quilts, a 30-day food supply, a 5-gallon jug of water, a paramedic trauma kit, flares, a flashlight, a spot, some Quest protein bars, a Halon fire extinguisher, and most importantly, a Frisbee that we can play Frisbee golf until the rescuers come up. Okay, well, maybe you all don't have a Cessna 206 and you can't carry 200 pounds of stuff in your airplane. So this is what I actually carry. I carry a 3-day kit from Ready America. They sell them here in every hardware store for about $40. In Home Depot and Lowe's on the West Coast, they call them earthquake kits. In South, the Ready Americas are sold at Home Depots and Lowe's, and they're called hurricane kits. So they're commonly available in most hardware stores. Make sure you carry a Halon fire extinguisher. I do want to be very clear. Halon is not good for you, but it is not nearly as bad for your lungs as an ABC powder extinguisher. An ABC powder fire extinguisher only does 3 things in an airplane. It may put out the fire, but if it's behind the panel, it won't reach it. It will, however, completely blind you and cause a lot of respiratory damage as all that powder coats your alveoli, the lung sacs, and it's just not good for you. Halon fire extinguisher is, of course, what's recommended, and you can find them Sporties, Aircraft Spruce, all this kind of stuff. I do carry a Global Star satellite phone and a Global Star Spot, and I carry life vests. Life vests are only legally required if you're out of glide range from the shore. That's a hint to all of you who fly over the Great Lakes. I know there's a regulation that says if you're more than 25 miles offshore, but there's another regulation in that same subsection that very clearly says if you're out of glide range. So if you cross a Great Lake or you fly over to Catalina Island at 3,000 feet, you will not be within glide range of the shore if you have an engine failure, and you're legally required to carry life vests. And these are the same life vests the airlines carry, and they're about $100 a pop. Certainly worth it as far as my head's concerned. So that 3-day survival kit, I always add to it road flares. And this is the old style road flares that actually put out fire. The Halon fire extinguisher, the life vest, the PLB. Now, a Spot's not actually a PLB, which is a personal locator beacon. You can buy those as well. But the problem with just a PLB, and the Spot will function as one, is that you have to manually trigger it to get people to come hunt for you. If you're critically injured, but you're on that CSAR approved flight plan, you don't have to hit SOS and they'll come anyway. That's why I like these better than just the strict PLBs. And of course, I want to literally just be able to call 911. I carry a satellite phone everywhere I go as well. So what's in those 3-day backpacks? Well, food and water for 2 people for 3 days. But since I'm always on an open flight plan and I always fly with flight following and I have a Spot and a satellite phone, I'm not hanging out long enough to try and eat that stuff. If anybody's ever tried earthquake or survival food, it's food. I'll just say that. but I certainly would be happy for a drink of water, and most importantly, those foil survival blankets and the ponchos to help keep myself warm. There are a couple light sticks for light, and there's a very rudimentary first aid kit. Really not much of anything, a couple Band-Aids and some alcohol wipes. I supplement that with stuff that you can buy at any Walgreens or CVS, but you get that and a couple road flares, and it's very lightweight and you can take with you in any airplane on any trip and never have to worry about weight and balance. I actually also carry those both in my wife's truck and my car. We always carry one of those as well. Really, really important. You got to be able to get to the supplies after the crash. So remember Brian's crash with the 172 where the tail actually broke and separated from the airplane, and that's where all his stuff was. Putting any emergency supplies in the luggage compartment of a plane might be kind of useless if the tail's not attached to the plane anymore or you're too injured to get to it. Like Brian was injured and his wife was unconscious with a critical head injury. He couldn't leave her to get out of the plane and go as far back into the airplane tail. All that stuff moved to the far aft part of the tail, and the tail actually cracked and partially separated from the plane. So putting stuff in the luggage compartment doesn't really help you. So what I do, I teach mountain flying. I teach some 1 day, 3, 5, and 7 day mountain flying intense courses. We always have them secured in a passenger seat to where I can get to them. And you really want to strap down all flight bags and all supplies before every flight. There have been a lot of people that have been killed and given some really nasty head injuries by flight bags, that were unsecured, that flew up from the back seat and hit the pilot in the back of the head. People have been killed by stuff like this. So really be very careful and make sure all flight bags and all belongings are secured with belts before every flight. And yeah, there's a really bad picture of me with a bad hair day and sporting my nice Global Star visor. What I want you to look at is ignore the bad hair, ignore the blatant Global Star advertisement. I want you to look at where the spot is. The spot is actually on my lanyard around my neck when I teach mountain flying and wilderness classes, because it's always attached to me so I can manually hit the SOS. Now, the satellite phone is in a seat pocket, and there's an emergency kit strapped to a passenger seat behind me, but that spot's actually always around my neck. Another nice thing you can do is, as Brian was saying, you can go on Amazon or any REI or sporting goods store, get yourself a little fishing vest and wear this when you fly. And do you need to load all this stuff if you're doing traffic pattern at your home airport? No. But I recommend it on any cross country where you're out of possible radar contact, because you could crash and then simply not know it. And again, if you want to sit there for 2 days with a broken leg, it's nicer to have your cell phone, a satellite phone, first aid supplies, that kind of stuff with you. And a vest like this is what I wear on my 3, 5, and 7 day mountain flying courses, because on those mountain flying courses, I'm actually landing at airports in the mountain canyons where cell phones don't even work. I want to have this stuff with me. Now, that's all the stuff you all as good pilots should do, and those are my recommendations. I do want to talk about a couple questions real quick before I go on. Hank Canterbury, hey Hank, has a good question. How likely are road flares to ignite by some unexpected event in the plane? They are not. Road flares are actually ignited by striker. So unless the airplane is on fire, the flares cannot catch fire on their own. Aaron in Florida. Hey, Aaron. What's the cost for data on a satellite phone, or is it an annual service charge? It just depends on how much you use it. You can, Global Star and Iridium both make sat phones for airplanes, and the cost is pretty low if you're not going to use it a whole lot. Now, if you're going to use a satellite phone as your full-time phone, I imagine it would get pretty expensive. But I know Global Star has plans for, just maybe $40 a month. Somebody just asked me a question and I deleted their name. I'm so sorry. What about a firearm? Well, it is standard practice in Alaska to carry a firearm on every flight. I do recommend, if you own a firearm and have taken a lot of training and legally allowed to carry it in your state and going on cross-country or wilderness flights, that you carry it with you. I certainly do on wilderness flights, but like anything else, it's not just buy a gun and go. You got to take a lot of training classes and way above the minimum. And you've got to know how to use it in an emergency. So for the right people, I think a firearm is great. For people without training, I think it's probably more dangerous than not having one. Let's answer a couple more questions. Why the road flares instead of a flare gun? Paul Hoffman. Paul, that's an awesome question. A flare gun is great for signaling, but is not good for starting a fire. And that's why I'm carrying the flares to start a fire. There's a running joke in my family that I'm the only person who goes camping in national parks every year and is completely unable to start a fire without a blowtorch and 3 to 5 gallons of gasoline poured on sticks. I seem to just lack the ability to start a fire. I will tell you, a flare will start a fire no matter how incompetent you are, especially if you're incompetent like me. I've watched all these YouTube videos and read all these books, and I'm just incapable of starting a fire without a flare. So that works pretty simple for me. So you're trained, you've got some stuff, that's awesome, but are your passengers trained? So I want you to do a good pre-flight briefing and a good training of your passengers before every flight. You need to tell them where the emergency supplies are. You need to show them how to use your Spot, your satellite phone, your ELT. And you need to train them to tune in 121.5 and how to make radio calls and listen for traffic. There have been some really unfortunate documented stories of pilots who crashed and pilots who died. The passengers who were later rescued didn't know there was a satellite phone in the airplane and did not know how to work 121.5. There have been some really unfortunate documented events like that. So if you have a satellite phone, but they don't know you have it and they don't know how to work it, it's not going to help if you're the one who's hurt. So make sure all your passengers know how to use and where all the emergency equipment is. So online, if you're online live on the webinar, there's a handout for you. And this copy, this passenger briefing card is actually there as a PDF. If you're watching this webinar as a recording later, no problem at all. If you go to pilotsafety.org and click on free downloads, you can download a copy of this PDF. And this is what I've created for all my passengers. And I actually show them the Spot and I say, here's a copy of the briefing card so you always have it. Especially with satellite phones. Many people can turn on a satellite phone but don't have any idea of how to use it. If you don't point the antenna vertically straight up at the satellites, they may not get a call through when otherwise they could. So I actually pull out my satellite phone and I show them how to point the antenna straight up. I show them how to dial 911. And most important, in the bottom right, I show them the exact buttons to push in order so that they can get their latitude and longitude out of the phone, because it's not always obvious. And like I said, it's always available online, and it's under free downloads. And right there is a Globalstar passenger card. Also, if you wanted any of the equipment we suggest, if you go over to pilotsafety.org and click on mountain flying, directly above mountain flying, we have links to to Amazon on products we recommend. And this is all stuff I carry. So if you were looking for links to find any of that, or if your Home Depot doesn't carry the survival kits, you can always buy it online. If you'd like to support Pilot Safety, I volunteer for them. I started them. We now have 14,000 members. We sell a lot of really good training DVDs online. For instance, our ForeFlight DVD set is 8.5 hours long. What's interesting is our G1000 training DVDs are only 6 hours long. ForeFlight actually does a lot more than a G1000 and is more complicated to learn. So if you'd like to really become a master at your avionics or ForeFlight FlyQ or get better at IFR, we do have some DVDs, and that actually funds a lot of the activity we do, along with obviously support from companies like Avemco. I actually teach a really good 3-day mastery program, and this is the plug for me. We're going to do all of that in 3 days, plus a lot of emergency training. So if you'd like to get better in your airplane and your avionics, I will come to you and do all this cool stuff, including over 20 instrument approaches, 2 of which with the panel completely blacked out and shooting down to ground level using an iPad only, which is one of the emergency things I train. I do a really cool 3, 5, and 7-day mountain flying trip, and this is how you sell it to your family. Every day we're going to land at a different national park, so it's an easy sell for the family. Trip of a lifetime, but let me tell you, at all of these airports, cell phones not going to work real well, especially out in Utah. Now, I do teach a mountain flying class. I will tell you, I'm not the best in the world. I'm a lot of fun. The best in the world is McCall Mountain Flying, and the Rocky Pilots, the Colorado Pilots Association and the Rocky Mountain Pilots Association really do even better mountain flying courses than I do. Mine's kind of a basic intro. If you have any questions that I don't get to answer on this, go over to pilotsafety.org and click on Ask the Experts. And under Ask the Experts, you can send myself, 2 other master instructors. You can send Mike from Avemco a question, and you can talk to air traffic controllers and senior medical examiners. Now, quick note, we volunteer for pilot safety. Sometimes it takes us a couple days to respond back. Please be patient with us, and we are volunteers, so we're happy to answer a simple question. If it's a 3-page essay, we're probably not going to be able to answer it in a simple question, but we may be able to refer you to a local training source. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to go through as many as I can. And we also have Mike Adams online. And let's bring Mike back live. Mike, you there?
Yes, I am, Gary.
Okay, so we have questions, and if any of you have questions for myself or Mike, let us know. Mike, do you have anything to add as I start reading through questions?
Not at this time. The questions that came in during the presentation were excellent. I've heard this presentation a couple of times and learned something new every time about it.
Okay, so let's look around, and some of these are just comments. If you think I didn't cover something that you'd like other people to know, that absolutely counts as well. So this is from Todd Smith. Hey, Todd. Todd says, I fly in the mountain areas around Arizona. I carry a PLB with me. Will that significantly reduce response time over an ELT? Todd, it absolutely will if you're awake and able to trigger it. That's why the CSAR equipped devices, in my opinion, are better. But yes, a PLB is an instant come get me now. Charles Aaron. Charles, you have a great question, and I have absolutely no answer for you. Why don't more people fly with a Spot or similar device? I don't know. Why don't more people do more safety training classes? I don't know. I will tell you, it's a small percentage of pilots who take FAA Safety Wings credit classes like this. It's a small percentage of pilots that do extra safety training, and it's a small percentage of pilots that carry emergency and survival gear. I would like to think that most pilots who don't carry this stuff just don't know about it or know the reasons why they should. I think it's a lack of widespread knowledge, much more so than them not caring. I've met some pilots that I considered, let's be politically correct, a lot, and I do mean a lot less safe than others, but I've never met a pilot who tried to be dangerous. I've met pilots and I've met flight instructors who weren't trained as well and did not have the safety mindset. but it goes back to the way they were trained. There's a law in training called primacy, where if they weren't trained to be safe and take extra training, they won't either. And unfortunately, that tends to go through. But my strong belief is that most people just don't know they should. And by the way, this recording, sponsored by Avemco, will be up on pilotsafety.org starting tomorrow. And all of you will get an email within 6 or 7 hours of tonight's webinar, if you're watching it live, with a link to a recorded version. Please don't be stingy. Please post it on Facebook, tweet it if you Twitter, Instagram it, whatever technology you use. Share it with everybody you know. The more people that watch this type of webinar, the less people that will get hurt. So Michael Cook has a great comment. He's obviously part of Civil Air Patrol. Civil Air Patrol only uses a grid search plan when there is no ELTs. The new modern ELTs broadcast on 401 megahertz and 21.5. Michael's absolutely right, but there is a caveat to that. They only use a grid search not only when there's not an ELT, but when nobody hears yours. Even if there is an ELT going off, if nobody hears it, they're still going to use that same grid search. So that's a great comment. Thanks, Michael. And if you are part of the Civil Air Patrol and anybody out there that is, thank you so much for your service to the country and to other pilots. Just scrolling through comments as we can. Now, Ron McCormick. Hey, Ron, thanks for chiming in there. Ron says, can ads be used as a locator? If your flight plan is expired and flight service cannot raise you, can ATC search for your ADS-B track? That's a loaded question, and I really would like to take a few minutes to talk about ADS-B. Unfortunately, that's a different webinar, but I want to give you the very short version. Many air traffic controllers do not know what ADS-B is. They don't know what it stands for, and they don't have it on their scopes. It is a true fact that some controllers with ADS-B technology on their scope actually turn it off because it is distracting and clutters up their screen. So ADS-B compliant with pilots must be accomplished by 2020, but it's not going to be instantaneously widespread through air traffic control. So I certainly wouldn't hope that somebody can follow that ADS-B track because I don't know if they can even search a previous track. Marshall, and I can't answer everybody, but I'm going to go through as many as I can. Marshall Severson. Hi, Marshall. Gary, good info on the CSAR here in Alaska. FAA Flight Service Station also have ESRS, which is Enhanced Special Reporting Service using SPOT, Spider Tracks, or the DeLorme because CSAR does not cover Alaska. I didn't know that. Thank you very much, Marshall. Paul Hoffman, would you tell me again why you would monitor 121.5 over dams, reservoirs, and military installations? Because I am legally required to. It's actually a FAR regulation, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you are actually legally required to monitor 121.5 on every cross-country flight over dams, reservoirs, military reservations, power plants, mines. There's a couple other things. And it's a legal requirement if you can. So if you have one radio in the plane, you obviously can't do that. If you are trying to listen to an ATIS on the second radio and you're busy, you obviously can't do that. But you are legally required to do that. And the reason is primarily for interception if you violate a TFR. But I just listen to it on every flight as I can. Alex, which regulation requires the immediate maintenance of seatbelt? You know, that's in the maintenance section that was shown to me by a very experienced IA. And I honestly don't remember if there's a specific regulation requiring the seatbelts or it's part of the service manual for all installed aircraft or all certified aircraft that then the regulations point to that. But it is legally required. And you can call any FSDO and ask to talk to a maintenance inspector, and they'll tell you the same thing. Okay, lots of people saying nice things about me and the seminar and Eventco, and we certainly really appreciate all this. Um, Brian Reed. Hi, Brian. Sounds stupid, but I've never heard of anybody bringing a motorcycle helmet when you have time to put it on before an off-field landing. Dumb idea? No, I don't think that's a dumb idea, Brian. Um, the military wears helmets on every flight. There's a reason helmets work. My only concern is I don't know if you'd have time to put it on, but you can always get a helmet with installed headsets. I have not gone to that point, but I don't think any idea is a dumb idea. So thanks, Brian. Carol Jewett talks about a route search and then branch out to grids. That's true. Stanley, I'm going to mess up your name. I'm sorry, buddy. Stanley Karchner. Stanley says, do I recommend carrying a portable aviation radio? I did for many, many years carry a handheld radio that I think I got from Sporties. Aircraft Spruce sells them. I no longer carry one on all my flights, although I do have one in my plane because I like to listen to the ATIS and get my instrument clearance before I turn on the expensive engine. But, with my satellite phone, I don't need one for emergencies anymore. Lots of people saying nice things. Appreciate all that. Timothy, I'm going to mess up your name too. Ayers. I'm so sorry. Can I describe my procedure to turn back during the 600-foot engine fire? That's another class. That's surviving engine failures and fires. But basically, it takes a lot of practice and a good crosswind. Just going through here as many. Steven Sachs has a great question. Hey, Steven. What do I need to do to get wings credit? Nothing. I'll take care of it, and I'll do it all within about 48 hours. Michael, do I fly in Nomex leisure suit? I don't. I'm not that concerned with a fire. Most airplane accidents happen because people don't put enough gas in the tanks, so there's very few fires. It wouldn't be a bad idea, especially in the mountains. I don't yet. What is Aaron from Florida? Hi, Aaron. What is available, I'm assuming from me, besides mountain safety classes? I teach 3-day boot camps all over the country, and they include emergency training and instrument and avionics training. Mike, got a question for you, buddy.
All right.
Mike, what is and this is from Todd Smith. Hi, Todd. What is the Eventco position on the use of the Cirrus parachute? The Cirrus guys have a saying of pull early, pull often. Do you guys have any option or any opinion, I'm assuming, on what it is, on if you should try an emergency landing and possibly save the airframe or pull the chute and definitely total the airframe? Mike, does Eventco have an official position on that?
We don't have an official position on it, but I'll give you a personal opinion this evening in that I'll go with several of the other aviation experts that say that if you're going to make an off-field landing, the first thing you've done is you've just sold your airplane to the insurance company, and your number one priority is to protect you and the passengers in your airplane. So that should always be your overriding factor in making a decision is whether you're going to pull a chute or not. But don't worry about the airframe. Those can be rebuilt, or they can be salvaged, or you can go buy a new one. Injury or death of someone, that's irreplaceable.
And, Mike, I'm going to throw my personal opinion in there. The second anything goes wrong with my plane, and I'm insured through Eventco, and actually Mike is my personal insurance agent. The second I have an emergency or an engine problem at any type, I assume that plane belongs to Eventco, and I'm just trying to get out of it alive. So,
absolutely.
Especially for Cirrus, by the way, the plural is called Cirri, I believe. I do a lot of Cirrus training for people. The most important thing is which is safer for you. If you think you can make a safe emergency landing and you feel that's safer, do that. If there's any doubt in your mind, pull the parachute. Just pull the parachute. Because that's going to give you a better chance, especially if you're over uneven or mountainous terrain. Ernie Koner, I'm so sorry, I'm bad with names. Hey, Ernie, he says ProTech, PRO-TEC makes a helmet that fits over headsets. Thanks, buddy. Harris Hairkill loves the seminar. Buddy, I'll put you on my mailing list and you'll hear we do seminars once a month by webinar. Jim Byerly has a question. Where can he find about filing via text message? Jim, you don't file a flight plan via text message, but if you file it online through 1-800-WXbrief.com, they will send you a text message saying, would you like to open or close your flight plan 30 minutes before your expected departure and your expected arrival. Daryl Swenson has a great point. What is the best way to see by rescue aircraft, especially in forest areas during the day? Smoke, and that's why I carry the flares. We have some other comments and other questions, but my voice is about done. So I'm going to call it a day. You can certainly reach me and Mike anytime for free over on that pilotsafety.org Ask the Experts button. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add before we call it a night?
Not this evening, except thank you very much for putting this on, Gary, and all of you that attended. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
And thank you to Avemco for supporting us. Everybody, you all have a great night. You'll get an email with a link to a recorded version. Share it with everybody. You all have a great night, and thanks for being safe pilots.